In the latter half of the 20th century, mankind was gripped by the fear of being invaded by extraterrestrials. They referred to extraterrestrial spacecraft as UFOs. Now, to those of us in this day and age, this sounds like a fairy tale. It is now the year 2560, and due to human race's countless encounters of alien life forms throughout the universe, Earth's social framework has expanded to cosmic proportions. Now trade, technology, transfer and cultural interchange are carried out on an interplanetary basis. The multi-billionaires who earn their enormous wealth through intergalactic trade, while satisfied with their rich lifestyles, also yearned for a new entertainment to stimulate their lazy lives. Their wishes were met by a call for a new project based upon a seemingly simple premise. Why not hold, on a galactic scale, some competition like the F1 races once held on Earth centuries ago? At once, everyone jumped at this idea. Rich merchants from cities in the clouds or asteroids with almost uninhabitable environments invested their wealth in the construction of racing circuits. These racing circuits were located as high up as 300 feet above ground and held in place by anti-gravitational guide beams on both sides of the course. The racing machines developed for these tracks used the very latest in supermagnetic technology and were designed to travel without wheels, hovering 1 foot above the course track. When the first Grand Prix race was held, people were angered at the brutality of the competition. The organisers had, during construction, placed various obstacles and traps along the raceway. But as time passed and people grew used to these dangers, they soon demanded even more excitement in the race. In time, winning this race meant earning the highest honour that could be bestowed on anyone in the universe. In a very short time, people came to call this Grand Prix simply F-Zero. That was the opening text of F-Zero in the manual, and set up both the universe and backstory for Nintendo's futuristic racing franchise. It was to be one of 2 launch titles for the Super Famicom, so it had to serve a dual purpose, both to be a good enough game that would draw people in and showcase the technological benefits the Super Famicom had over the Mega Drive. It needed to possess the wow factor. In the 1994 book Introduction to Game Design, Miyamoto stated that they had always envisioned launching a new racing series with the Super Famicom, not based on any existing properties. The original idea was to be a horizontal or top-down racer, however as progression on the Super Famicom continued, they realised they would be able to do something much more ambitious. Utilising the Super Famicom's Mode 7, the console was able to take a background layer, rotate and scale it on the fly. This was different to the previous method racing games used, which was to place objects on a conveyor belt to simulate movement. There are plenty of videos out there which exist detailing exactly how Mode 7 works, but the end result is that the appearance of a vehicle actually moving is far more convincing using it than previous 2D effects. There did exist some early 3D games which used polygons, but the graphical requirements for them to run smoothly was simply too high. Despite the advancements the Super Famicom would offer, it was not without its limitations. The reason that the vehicles in the game are hovercrafts is that animating wheels and the effects that go with wheels, such as smoke when drifting, caused the memory usage to be too high and the game would have lost its fluidity. Ensuring the game ran fast and smooth was important from the start, as it ensured that it was visually vibrant and exciting. Miyamoto explained that the first 2 to 3 minutes of someone playing a game are the most important, stating that that's the window of time in which the player's heart is seized. F-Zero was developed by Nintendo's Entertainment Analysis and Development Division in just 15 months, at the same time as developing other titles that were scheduled to either launch with the system or soon after. It would have been easy for them to create a visually impressive game that was good to sell consoles but didn't hold up particularly well. However, that was never their intention. They always wanted to make a great game. One of the reasons this is the case was that this is one of the first games fully developed inside Nintendo, so its success would be a source of pride. To clarify what I mean, it was common in the 80s and 90s for many video game developers to either be self-employed or to be part of a small company, and then bigger companies such as Nintendo to hire programmers for specific projects only, so as not to keep hiring and firing people when they didn't need them. This still happens today, with Nintendo working closely with companies such as Sora Limited, headed by Sakurai amongst others. F-Zero, however, was made entirely by 9 people, all directly employed by Nintendo. The primary people involved with the development was game director Kazunobu Shimizu, head programmer Yasunari Nishida, producer Shigeru Miyamoto, and designer Takaya Imamura. Although these roles might seem pretty well defined, Imamura stated that in the days of the Super NES it was common to work in various areas, which meant that Shimizu ended up working on the art as well, and the team would always share skill bases and help each other out. Director Shimizu stated that his original spark for what would become F-Zero originated from a business trip to Nintendo of America, in which they showed them Famicom Grand Prix 2 on the disc system. When they showed it to staff at Nintendo of America, they slated it, stating that it wouldn't sell if it was ever released in the West, and it wasn't cool. This awakened the fighter in Shimizu, wanting to make something that would truly impress them. At the time, Tim Burton's Batman was in theatres, and he was inspired by the futuristic designs in the movie, specifically the look of the Batmobile. It was Nishida that had been programming with Mode 7 for use in a racing game, and when Shimizu saw what he had been doing, it was clear to him that this was a graphical style which would shock and impress everyone. As I mentioned earlier, they originally experimented with wheeled vehicles, with Shimizu stating that they in effect looked like Hot Wheels cars. Imamura stated that the total number of frames in order to make the tyres move fluidly was staggering, so to save themselves the headache of figuring out a way to make it work, they simply removed the wheels altogether. Removing the wheels and making the vehicles hover cars made it quite clear that setting the game in the future would be perfect. However, the wheels were not the only reason the game was set in a futuristic environment. Shimizu states that another reason was that they were not able to render three-dimensional buildings, so they had a course floating in the air with the city far beneath or in the distance. This could again easily be explained by setting the game on futuristic tracks. Setting the game in the future gave them some benefits in terms of the creative direction, one of which was that the extreme speed of the vehicles was also easy to explain. However, the game was not always as freeform as it ended up. One aspect of F-Zero that many people like is that by utilising the jumps and certain sections, players can figure out their own shortcuts on various maps to decrease their lap times. However, until partway through development, each track had invisible walls lining the entire track. Imamura stated that they removed the walls at Miyamoto's suggestion, and that as soon as they did, it broadened the range of gameplay and made it feel awesome, transforming the game. It wasn't until the game itself was complete before they began thinking about the actual characters that would pilot the ships. Captain Falcon was not originally going to be a character in the game. In fact, according to Imamura, Captain Falcon was originally meant to be the mascot for the Super Famicom in its entirety, with his design matching the colours of the Super Famicom controller. Imamura states that he eventually became a character in the game through utilising him in his design for the packaging, and then when he drew the comic, Nintendo of America loved the comic, so it decided that it should be included in the game manual, and this event led to Captain Falcon becoming the face of F-Zero. The comic was intended to give sense of the game world that the game did not give, since they was not able to include that sort of story in the development period that they had. It's a little sad that when games like this are re-released, things like the comics and manuals are often lost to time, even though in the past they provided genuinely important parts of the experience. Nowadays they are afterthoughts, if they even exist, which is a little sad. Before release, when Nintendo showed off F-Zero at trade shows, it got an incredible response, which has followed through with the response after the game and the Super Famicom was released. It's never easy to tell if a new franchise is going to become popular, but F-Zero hit the mark. Recording and beating lap times became a popular competition between gamers, and finding new shortcuts and ways to beat certain levels is popular to this day. F-Zero is also one of the hardest games in the early Super Nintendo catalogue, and its later levels can be punishing. Even though the game is very difficult in its later levels, it's not difficult to play. In a 1990 interview, Miyamoto stated that they wanted it to be a game that was friendly to beginners, with simple, easy controls that anyone could understand. Miyamoto likened this to the original Super Mario Bros., in which anyone can enjoy it. He stated that he was worried the Super Mario world was becoming a little too complicated for new gamers, so wanted to ensure that F-Zero was as accessible as possible. This approach has led the game to being one that is easy to play but hard to master, which is always the sweet spot for any game, and almost ensures it being something that will appeal to gamers of all skill levels. The progression in the game is set out in quite a simple way. Each Grand Prix consists of 5 races, each one taking place on a unique track, each with 5 laps, and with the player making sure they are high enough in the positions or they will be eliminated and unable to progress. Starting with famous tracks like Mute City and Big Blue, introducing the basic setup for the turns, jumps, rough patches and boost work, it's a gentle start that quickly ramps up, especially with the computer players seemingly ramming and bumping into the player as they try and navigate the increasingly tight turns and difficult jumps. Compounding this, each vehicle has a set power, which can be reduced by crashing, hitting guide beams, rails or mines, and could even make the vehicle explode. There are a number of additional mechanics such as rocket start, super jet, brake tapping, rail bouncing and more, which give the game some hidden depth for more dedicated players to explore. F-Zero has left a great legacy in the gaming industry. For many people, it was their first introduction to the Super Nintendo and the 16-bit marvels that Nintendo would go on to make. It was one of the first racing games to be able to truly convey a sense of speed, and the fluid, vibrant and colourful graphics still hold up well today, far surpassing most of the drab, polygonal racers that early 3D consoles could offer. The gameplay and graphics had a direct effect on future entries in the racing genre, with direct influences such as Super Mario Kart and more indirect ones. It's a story of how 9 people made a truly fun, interesting game that was able to pull off the impossible task of being a technological showcase and a genuinely engrossing game, and it will continue to leave a mark for generations to come. Thanks for watching this little making of. If you like this video, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and a comment with your thoughts. I also have a Discord, which I'll link in the description. I made a few other making ofs, you can check these out in a playlist on my channel, and some of them will also be linked below. Additionally, if you wanted to support the channel, there's a little join button, so if you decided to click that, it would be amazing. Thanks for watching, goodbye!